Here in the United States, when it comes to foreign figures, we deal in cartoons only and caricatures. And so that was the case when it comes to Alexei Navalny. He, on the one hand, was the hero of the Russian resistance and the leading light of that nation. If you hear from other people, he was a racist, an Islamophobe, a CIA stooge who deserved what he got. So to try to actually move it from cartoon caricature into kind of real life, we're going to be joined by socialist commentator Egor Kotkin, joining us from Moscow. Egor, you've talked a little bit about Navalny online recently. If we can put up this element from Egor here. This is one of the things you said. The living Navalny was important not because of his politics, but as a political trailblazer. Dead Navalny is important as a symbol of resistance to the oligarchic regime. And the same people who killed him as a human now are trying to kill him as a symbol. Don't be a part of it. And Egor, what I found interesting about your analysis, which people can find on your Twitter account and is much deeper than that, is that if you were here in the United States, you'd probably be in the camp of people who were saying, actually, this guy's a CIA stooge and deserves what he got. But there's so much more to the Navalny story. So let me start with this question. What's been your kind of relationship to Navalnyism over your own political evolution?
Well, I have to say I knew Navalny as a political figure, and followed in his career for almost 15 years. And most of this time, I was a Navalny skeptic because of, it's not a secret that he started basically as a fascist. His video from 2007, when he referred to immigrants as cockroaches, being resurfaced again with his name back in the news. And there was a lot. Then he moved to the left. He constantly, in my view, constantly moved to the left over this 15-year public career, reaching first liberal center, then moving even slightly to the left, almost borderline social democratic policies, but still staying firmly in the liberal center. And I think the history of Navalny will resonate with your audience specifically because this is a history of a populist who was following his whole life path was finding a way to communicate with the most Russian people as possible. And as many populists going for the most people, he started from the lowest possible denominator. So he started from the right and started from xenophobia. But
did he ever recant the xenophobia? Did he recant that, or what?
Yes.
What was his evolution like?
Well, he entered very soon. He moved on to anti-corruption investigations, and he entered the liberal center, liberal media, who became his main base of support and network of support. And he moved on from the Russian marches and Russian nationalism to being basically liberal centrist, like closer to 2013, 2015. But he still was looking for, he still was staying in the populist lane. It's just when he found that being populist right put you in certain fringe area, very limited area, of a fringe right, he moved on to the center, but he started to experiment with leftist populist policies, and in some of them he actually went to the left of his main base of support and network of support, liberal people. When, for example, in 2018. Coming a presidential election in Russia, where he tried to compete with Putin, he suggested increase in minimum wage 2.5 times from 10,000 rubles to 25,000 rubles. It is very substantial increase. It is very necessary increase for Russia. It's even harder situation than in America in terms of living wage here. And he was heavily criticized by his own base and network of support by the liberal center. To the extent that even now, 6 years later, when he already dead, this topic of debate about this minimum wage increase, he suggested again, was reiterated in the day of his death by his supporters. So this debate never died.
So Egor, one of the things that I'm trying to get to, I think that for our audience, they're hearing about him a lot in our news. What I hear from you is he was a complicated figure. You know, we understand him only as a Putin critic. You know, from what I can tell, he was a Russian nationalist, but he was an anti-corruption activist. But he wasn't necessarily, you know, the dream of European politicians. Like, how did people inside of Russia think of Navalny, and why did Putin consider him a threat enough to throw him in prison?
I think you can't tell how people in Russia think about Navalny, because it's heavily skewed by the propaganda from Putin media on the one hand, and the liberal propaganda from independent media on the other hand. So his view in any Russian group will be heavily skewed by ideological bias. And I think Putin recognized him as the biggest threat to his rule, because Navalny always targeted him as his main enemy, and his populist search for whatever give him the most base of support. He also experimented with support of unions at some point, being one of the first politicians who tried to restore unions as a political force in Russia since USSR fall. So again, it was kind of leftish of him to try to do this. He always tried to maximize his base of support to beat Putin. So his target always was Putin, and that made him. He obviously had some ideology, but his main goal in life was to defeat Putin. And he was ready to utilize any means necessary to do that in terms of political. He never crossed the line of political violence, actually. But in terms of political engagement, he was looking everywhere for every way to defeat Putin. That's why he was that dangerous for Putin. That's why Putin kind of singled out him as his enemy, and that's why when I said wrote this tweet on his death, he was mainly a trailblazer. My politics is not Navalny politics. I evolved myself from like liberal center to basically a socialist right now. So I always was to the left of him. We never saw eye to eye, but I saw in his what he's doing the best possibility for opening for leftist electoral politics in Russia, which right now doesn't exist. So I thought, and his experiments with the left initiatives like raising minimum wage, reanimating unions, and helicopter money during the COVID lockdowns, and social democratic initiatives like that, they were very useful. And his electoral initiatives like smart voting actually helped to elect some leftist deputies in Moscow City Duma from the young leftist ilk, not all the Red Guard who basically go with Putin 100% of times, but from the young opposition leftists. They for the first time got in some high places of power in Russia being elected. Right now they're all already removed from there, but for the first time since 1991, new leftist ilk got in places in power in part with help of Navalny.
One of the things you'll hear here in the United States about him is that actually kind of American elites overblow how much power he had, how much support he had among Russian people. What's your sense of what kind of base of social support he had there?
I think it's true. I think they projected a lot of their own expectations on Navalny, and his real base of support. I don't think it ever would, in like perfectly free elections with strong leftist parties, strong social democratic presence, not only Putin versus Navalny. I don't think the liberal center that Navalny represents would ever broke 15% threshold as it was in the 90s, because when there was kind of free-ish election in the 90s in Russia, the liberal center always was kind of marginal. That's why they lost.
Did you say 15 or 50?
15. 15. No,
15.
I don't think it would be much more than that. Because
so tiny.
Yeah, actually, yes. Well, significant, noticeable, but not like the leading party, because either nationalist right, pro-Putin right, or old school pro-Soviet left still has a much bigger base of support in Russia for natural reasons.
But Egor, even within that, from your realistic assessment, he was thrown in prison, sent above the Arctic Circle, and we can put this up there on the screen. Apparently, they're telling his family that he suffered from some like quote sudden death syndrome, which we have here. I mean, it's just laughable for many of us to look at. I know you've told me many times that people in Russia, they probably don't even hear stuff like this, or if they do, they believe it. But, it seems to us a position of weakness to kill somebody, in this manner, whenever, as you describe, it's not even a realistic threat. What can that tell us about Putin himself, at this moment in time?
The reason of this being death is actually kind of funny, yes. Well, what can I say? It all comes back to his main goal being able to defeat Putin. And his ability to utilize, overall, in a normal electoral situation, calm and democratic, I don't think his brand of liberalism would have more than 15% of support. But he was, in terms of political repression that Putin created, he was able to mobilize this 15% disproportionately. It was young people living in big cities, people living in Moscow. His highest rating in Moscow elections was almost 30% 10 years ago. It was a very high result for a liberal politician. So he was able to utilize this young, passionate part of the Russian people who would go on the streets, on the protests, on the biggest street protests, were either with Navalny presence 10 years ago when Putin announced that he's going back as a president for the third term, or 10 years later when Navalny was returned to Russia 3 years ago and was imprisoned. Again, the biggest protest in the last 10 years broke up on the streets, again, in connection with Navalny name. So his ability to be visible and mobilize youth and mobilize street politics in the way that any other political force in Russia can't or wouldn't do, I think that's what put him on the map, and that's why Putin was, in some fashion, maybe if Putin was more democratic, irrationally afraid, because I don't think that, we can see how politics can change leaders, names, parties, and still remain the same on the example of America. So there is a lot of ways to continue the status quo, especially if the status quo is the power of 100 or 1,000 richest people in the country. Without political repression, or even without political killings, or even without rigging the elections. You can do it through different means, like America does.
Makes sense. Egor, we always appreciate your analysis live from Moscow. As a reminder, this man is literally, risking a lot, to be able to just come to us live. You can follow him on Twitter. We'll have a link to that in the description. And we always appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Hey, guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.